Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Deontay Wilder recently said that he was betting on himself, and part of the reason for turning down over $100 million in a 4-fight deal, which would have included Anthony Joshua on DAZN, was he thought he could do a better job himself, go his own way, and make just as much money doing it his way, staying with Showtime, staying loyal. And certainly divergent views over whether that was the right call at the time, and it remains to be seen how that will play out over time. But what we have seen is, effectively, with the betting on himself comment, if you look at it like this, the road to undisputed looks to be 3 or 4 fights away. And the Dominic Breazeale fight was leg 1. So leg 1 of either 4 or 5 legs in the race. And Deontay Wilder has come through that. Emphatic victory. The knockout felt around the world. Dominic Breazeale completely starched Deontay Wilder, putting an exclamation point on that performance. And certainly some of the coverage, some of the reaction to that, it's a lot of people have been warming up to Deontay Wilder. That's in spite of some of his outlandish comments and some of the things that he says and does outside of the ring. But you can't doubt the in-ring performance. That was an emphatic performance. But it's leg 1 of betting on himself. So what I wanted to do in this video was talk about some of the what next, some of what I think he needs to do and what we need to see to help build towards that undisputed fight. Because let's be real about this now. Deontay Wilder has already said good things come to those who wait, and that this now is all about money. So this next wee while, which could be a year and a half until we get the fight that we want to see, is about him building his commercial value. So with that in mind, buckle in. Let's go. So the first couple of fights, logically in this leg 2 and leg 3 of betting on himself, is likely to be Luis Ortiz, the rematch, and Adam Kownacki. So the order, well, who knows what that would be, but those are the 2 next guys, the next cabs off the rank. So we'll start though with Luis Ortiz. That was a very fun fight a year ago, March 2018. Deontay Wilder coming through with a 10th round knockout after having been hurt in that fight. Some controversy in that fight after Deontay Wilder was given some extra time with a doctor coming up to the ring apron after the bell had sounded for the 8th round. Him getting about an extra 8 seconds or so as the doctor examined him. With the rematch, there's an opportunity here for Deontay Wilder to actually go in and clear up and sort of put to bed, put to rest any controversy that may have arisen from that fight. Clearly, Luis Ortiz, he wasn't exactly happy with the result and how things panned out. He admits that he made mistakes in that fight, but you can guarantee Deontay Wilder, he made some mistakes too, but ultimately he got the job done. The equalizer, the right hand, came through, got the job done. And in a second fight, I believe that Deontay Wilder probably beats Luis Ortiz more comfortably than he did the first time. It was a bit of a struggle in there in the first fight, but I think Luis Ortiz we've seen since then, despite a couple of decent performances. I mean, I actually quite liked his performance against Travis Kaufman. He wrecked Razvan Kajanu. But against Christian Hammer, this was in March 2019, he looked a bit vulnerable in there, and Hammer was able to tag him with the right hand quite a bit in that fight. So I think if he is sort of on the decline, and remember he's 40 years old now, Deontay Wilder in a rematch I think is going to beat him and knock him out much more emphatically than the first time around. This could be a fight that only goes, a few rounds, maybe half a dozen rounds. I think Luis Ortiz, even though he is a very good technical boxer, I think Deontay Wilder with better preparation, and remember heading into that fight, that was Wilder's biggest fight of his career to date, and arguably still his best win in terms of resume. Obviously there's the draw with Tyson Fury, so you can argue the draw and the merits of a win against Ortiz about which is better, but I think for argument's sake, until that point, it was certainly the best win of his career. But a second time around, I think he will be more relaxed in there. He probably, he's been there, done that, got the postcard with Ortiz, and I think he will be more confident. He will probably be able to work Ortiz out a bit sooner and land that right hand. But then again, Ortiz is crafty and cagey. he is still a good name for Deontay Wilder to have on his resume. Let's not forget, Luis Ortiz is still well inside the top 10 of the heavyweight division, so it's a very good name for Deontay Wilder to get on his record. There's a reason that Anthony Joshua wanted to face Luis Ortiz, and they're still calling him out for after June, saying, Ortiz can still fight me. That can be next. A win against Ortiz does mean something, and it does have some currency in the heavyweight division. And it would sort of put to bed, what happened in the first fight. But Deontay Wilder, similar to the Dominic Breazeale fight, he needs to have that ending in a emphatic knockout. A points win, all that sort of stuff, a win is a win after all, but there is something about a knockout, and especially a brutal knockout, that really captures fans' imagination. We're in the midst of it right now. There's a lot of positive fan sentiment towards Deontay Wilder as a result of his win over Dominic Breazeale. And if you look at Breazeale, he was a top 20 guy. And then if he steps up to a guy like Luis Ortiz, who's firmly inside the top 10, well, that is it's a couple of decent wins under his belt. On to Adam Kownacki. Him or Ortiz, doesn't matter the order, they look likely to be the next two guys. Adam Kownacki, a contender on the rise, and he is a guy who was sort of on the bubble of the top 10, generally regarded somewhere between 8 and 12 depending on who you talk to. But for argument's sake, we'll call him a top 10 fighter, and I don't think too many people would have disputes about that. And for me, with Adam Kownacki, there's a bit of interest for me because he's a fresh contender, someone we haven't seen in a title fight. He's not a retread, and that's nothing against Dominic Breazeale or nothing against Luis Ortiz or Andy Ruiz or any of these other guys who are getting second title shots. But there is something to be said of a guy who's been rising up the division, getting that first and fresh title shot when you know they're good, but you just don't know how good. And Adam Kownacki has been sort of cutting a path through some of Deontay Wilder's former championship opponents. Destroyed Gerald Washington in a couple of rounds. It was a much more devastating performance than Deontay Wilder's performance. He also beat Artis Bilker in less than half the time that it took Deontay Wilder to knock him out. So there's some interest there because at the moment, triangle theories are just all over the place. And people are doing the Breazeale, Wilder and Joshua triangle theory to equate that Deontay Wilder is going to beat Anthony Joshua as a result of the performance against Breazeale. But if people want to push that narrative, well, how do they account for Adam Kownacki decimating a couple of Wilder's former opponents, championship opponents, in much quicker time than Wilder? So there is something to be said about, beating a champion's former opponents and then going on to face the champion, especially if you've beaten those other opponents sooner. It does raise my interest level in that fight. But again, like Dominic Breazeale, I do kind of think that the style matchup does favour Wilder. Big reach advantage, obviously, if he can stay at range, even just for a short time to get away his right hand. Adam Kownacki doesn't necessarily move his head all that much. Kind of like Dominic Breazeale. Probably a bit more head movement than Breazeale, but to me that would seem like an accident waiting to happen. But Kownacki is a very good pressure fighter. He can take some punishment, but against that right hand, no one can stand up to that right hand for too long. But if he was able to go in there, Deontay Wilder, and this is leg 2 or 3 of betting on himself ahead of an undisputed fight, get a knockout against Kownacki, that helps boost his value if he can get another spectacular sort of performance in there to some extent. And it's debatable about how much he can actually increase his commercial value facing these opponents. I mean, there is, merits for and against that. Because you look at it, this fight with Breazeale, although spectacular, it was on Showtime. Wilder reportedly getting somewhere around $10 million, Breazeale about $1 million, $1.5 million, something like that. I'm sure Showtime is actually, for the moment, for these fights with those sorts of paydays, would be going backwards on the event. But because Wilder is betting on himself and he's betting with Showtime and he's seemingly about to land a very lucrative deal with them, they're probably willing to actually invest into Wilder, knowing that there is likely a decent return down the line for some sort of mega pay-per-view which they want to sink their teeth into. So just like how DAZN is spending into the market right now, I think Showtime is kind of doing something similar. I think they're investing in Wilder for the return later on. Because if you look at the likes of Luis Ortiz or Adam Kownacki, Deontay Wilder is probably the 60-40 favourite in those fights, if not a bit stronger. I think most people would expect him to get by those two opponents. And if he can get those sort of cherry on the top spectacular knockouts, that just keeps the sort of buzz and the hype train sort of rolling along. It doesn't necessarily increase his commercial value that much, but what could do that is the next leg in betting on himself, which would be a Tyson Fury fight. I think if Deontay Wilder is to get close to 50-50, or in fact 50-50, which is his demand, and he said in his post-fight interview after Brazil that this is about building it up so he can get so they can get as much money as possible for when they do fight an undisputed fight. And I think a key to that is facing Fury before he would face Anthony Joshua. And that's a tricky proposition. As we know, Tyson Fury put on a very credible, very good performance in that first fight. Many argue that he did win. I thought he won. But Deontay Wilder, with the right hand, did manage to drop him twice in that fight. Ultimately, it was ruled a draw. So into a rematch with Tyson Fury, which I think Fury would be better for because he's deeper into his comeback. Don't know if he was 100% heading into that. But if Deontay Wilder can calm the nerves, be as relaxed as he was against Dominic Breazeale, go in there with the confidence that he's building right now, he would have a very good shot in that fight, and he's proven he can land that right hand on Tyson Fury. Even though Fury says he can't be touched, clearly he can be. And if Deontay Wilder can have that rematch with Fury, and let's set aside broadcasting issues because that's a quagmire in itself, but should they get that one made, and should they have that rematch, which would have been a very highly anticipated rematch had it happened already, that could really put Deontay Wilder into another level of commercial value. And that's the point I think he can get 50-50 with Joshua. Against Ortiz and Kownacki, he can probably put another brick or two in the wall to help sort of build him up a little bit, especially with good performances, good knockouts. But he needs Fury to really get that mega money versus Anthony Joshua. And it's clear at the moment Deontay Wilder doesn't want to fight for less than 50-50. So he may end up getting it in the end. Part of that is through what he's doing in his own career against the opponents he would be facing. But maybe some of that is Joshua coming to the realization that he can't get the piece of legacy he's seeking without Wilder. And Wilder knows this. And as I said in a recent Patreon video, if you were Joseph Parker, having fought Joshua about a year ago for about, $7 to $10 million, something like that, and now we're talking the sort of money that Deontay Wilder might get in a fight with Joshua, I can't help but thinking maybe Joseph Parker had that fight with Joshua a little too early. But that's by the by now. But Deontay Wilder betting on himself, going through Ortiz and a Kownacki, and then to a Fury, which is certainly no gimme, and that would be a very tough fight. Fury could definitely win it and upset the apple cart. He could have his own undisputed. But that's the thing. There is no guarantees in this game, and this is why Deontay Wilder is saying he's betting on himself. He may win, he may not. Time will tell, but the next year or so looks pretty much mapped up, and we shall see how it all pans out and where the dust settles. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.